The second is a clarity of mission. The clarity of mission. Now, if your organization, and in the case of the church, if your church is not clear about its purpose or why it exists, it's going to struggle some. You've got to have some clear sense of this is the direction that we're going, this is why we exist. Captain Cunningham told me the first thing that he did when new sailors came on board the ship is they had a 2-week indoctrination period in which the primary task was to help them to understand the purpose of that particular ship. This is how we fit into the Navy, this is how we fit into the world, this is what we're supposed to be about. I wonder, do the people in your church, on your ship, do they understand the purpose of your congregation? For many of you, they do. For some of you, not so. But if I were to come to your church and ask anyone who I saw, tell me what is the purpose of your church, would they be able to tell me? At Church of the Resurrection, most of our staff, I'm counting on the fact that all of them, but I'd say most of them could repeat word for word our purpose statement. Most of our lay leaders, in fact, I'd guess all of our lay leaders could repeat our purpose statement. And we're constantly hammering that home again. We put it in 20-inch letters in the narthex so people couldn't forget it. Our purpose is to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. And everything we do is keyed off of that. Everything we do ties back into that. I'll give you one example. We did a series of sermons earlier this year, I'll tell you more about in a moment, called Conversations with an Atheist. And it was what we call a fishing expedition series of sermons. So we announced it on Candlelight Christmas Eve, and the sermon series was based upon really a reaction to Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. Richard Dawkins is one of the most outspoken atheists, and we sold the book in our bookstore, and we said, we're going to talk about this. We're going to hear the legitimate complaints he has against people who believe in God, and then we're going to offer a reasoned response to that. And we'd like to invite you to join us for this series of sermons. And in the second or third week, we received a letter from one of our members who worshiped in the chapel at our 745 service, who said, I'm asking you to remove my name from the membership rolls at Church of the Resurrection. I don't want to be a part of a church where the pastor is preaching about what atheists believe. And you know, I was sorry to hear that. You know, I felt bad. I felt bad for her. I felt bad for us that she was leaving. And yet, you know, the response is really this. There are 1,400 other churches in Kansas City, most of whom will never preach a sermon series based upon Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. But our church exists to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. And this is the #1 best-selling book on the New York Times bestseller list. It is the #1 best-selling book in Amazon.com, and there are lots of people reading this, and we are going to address these questions. And so we wish you well wherever you go, and we hope you come back. But you know, this sermon series only lasts 6 weeks. Come back after that. Won't do it again for at least another couple of years. So. But a clarity of mission, and that drives everything we do. So we're going to evaluate every staff member. Tell us, what are you doing to help us build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians? Yesterday at the preaching seminar that I did with a number of you, that mission statement drives my sermon series. So I realize my job as a preacher, at least one of my tasks as a preacher, is to do everything I can do as a preacher and in preaching to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. Are your people clear about the task? Do they understand? Here, I'll give you one more example of this. We host the symphony for their Pops concert series every year. It's really a fun thing. We had Neil Sedaka and the symphony here the other day doing a concert, and the place was, you know, packed out. And so, you know, you might say, well, how does that fit in, you know, with building a Christian community where non-religious? Well, if it doesn't fit in, we're not going to do it. But if it does fit in, so how does it fit in? Well, for us, this is really key. We want to have the symphony here because that means there's 3,000 people, 1,500 of whom don't normally go to our church, many of whom don't go to church anywhere, and they're coming into our sanctuary. But we want to make sure that somewhere along the way in the introductions, the head of the symphony is recognizing that and saying something about, you know, we don't have to tell them to do this, but saying something about, hey, aren't these people at Church of the Resurrection great? And then I tell our folks, they buy season tickets, and their task is to be salt in the sanctuary at the symphony. And I love this because they're doing it. They're constantly, you know, I went back to see a woman who was sitting right back over here at the symphony the other day, and she's turning to the guy next to her who doesn't go to church anywhere and saying, you really ought to come to our church. Hey, here's our pastor. Let me introduce you to him. You know, and so it's not overtly evangelism, but underneath it is saying, let's open our home and welcome people. And if they come here and they find that there's a welcome, maybe they'll come back for something else. Now, we started preparing a little brochure that goes in the seat backs for the symphony, so that when somebody was there for the symphony, they might pick that up, and it wasn't a 4 spiritual laws tract. It was just a, hey, here's who we are as a church. If you're interested, if we can serve you in any way, we'd welcome the opportunity. But being intentional around our purpose.